It was December 11, 2009, at the Samuel Goldwyn Theater in Beverly Hills, California. 2,000 people filled every seat for the world premiere of Invictus, Clint Eastwood's film about Nelson Mandela and the 1995 Rugby World Cup. The theater buzzed with energy. Hollywood A-listers sat alongside South African dignitaries. Morgan Freeman and Matt Damon were there. International media packed the press section. Studio executives occupied the prime VIP rows. Everyone was waiting for Clint to introduce his film. He was walking down the center aisle toward the stage when he suddenly stopped, turned around, and pointed at an empty seat in the VIP section. "Where is he?" Clint asked, his voice cutting through the pre-show chatter. The theater went silent. 2,000 people stopped talking simultaneously. "Where is who?" a publicist asked, nervously, rushing toward Clint with her clipboard and headset. "The rugby player," Clint said, still pointing at the empty seat. "The Springbok who consulted on the film. His seat is empty." Security personnel exchanged confused glances. The publicist checked her list frantically. Within 5 minutes, what should have been a routine premiere introduction became a moment that would be talked about in Hollywood for years. This is not a story about movies or premieres or even about rugby. This is about loyalty, dignity, and what happens when someone with power uses it to honor people the system is designed to ignore. In 2009, film premieres were choreographed to perfection. Every seat was assigned based on importance. Front rows for stars and major producers, middle sections for studio executives and financiers, back sections for press and industry guests. VIP sections had names on reserved cards. Security checked lists at every entrance. Publicists managed flow like air traffic controllers. The system worked because everyone understood the hierarchy. If your name wasn't on the list, you didn't get in, regardless of your contribution to the film. The premiere was about spectacle, marketing, and maintaining Hollywood's social order. Contributors who weren't famous or powerful might be thanked in credits, but they weren't invited to premieres. That wasn't cruelty. It was just how things worked. Invictus had been a challenging production. Clint was directing a film about Nelson Mandela, South Africa's first black president, and how he used the 1995 Rugby World Cup to unite a divided nation. The film required authenticity that couldn't be faked. Clint needed to understand rugby, a sport virtually unknown to American audiences. He needed to understand South African culture, the dynamics between black and white South Africans in 1995, and the specific history of the Springboks rugby team. Most importantly, he needed the rugby sequences to look real, performed by people who actually knew the sport. The production hired several former Springboks from the actual 1995 team as consultants and extras. These men had lived the story the film was telling. They'd been on that field when South Africa won the World Cup. They'd experienced Mandela's vision firsthand. Their contributions during filming were invaluable. They taught the actors how to play rugby properly. They explained the culture of the sport. They shared personal stories that informed performance. One player in particular, we'll call him Piet van der Merwe, had spent 3 months on set, working closely with the actors playing Springboks, ensuring every tackle, every scrum, every moment of rugby action looked authentic. Piet wasn't famous outside South Africa. He'd retired from professional rugby years ago. He was now a coach in Johannesburg, living a normal life far from Hollywood glamour. When Clint's production team approached him about consulting on the film, Piet had been honored and excited. He'd taken 3 months away from his coaching job, flown to Los Angeles, and worked tirelessly to help make the film as authentic as possible. Clint had noticed Piet's dedication immediately. Here was someone who cared deeply about the story being told correctly, who worked long hours for modest pay, who never complained or asked for special treatment. Clint made a point of talking with Piet regularly during production, asking about rugby culture, about the 1995 team, about what it meant to represent South Africa during that transitional period. As production wrapped, Clint personally thanked Pihat. "You made this film better," Clint told him. "Your contribution matters. When we premiere this in Los Angeles, you'll be there." "That's a promise." Pihat was touched but didn't think much of it. Actors and directors said nice things during emotional wrap parties. Promises made in the moment didn't always survive the return to normal Hollywood business. But Clint Eastwood wasn't most directors, and when he promised something he meant it. Months later, as the premiere approached, Clint's assistant reached out to Pihat in South Africa. Would he be able to fly to Los Angeles for the world premiere? The production would cover airfare and hotel. Pihat was stunned. Directors didn't actually follow through on these things. But Clint had. Pihat arranged time off from his coaching job and flew to Los Angeles, arriving 2 days before the premiere. He attended some pre-premiere events, met other cast and crew, felt slightly out of place among Hollywood people but appreciated being included. The night of the premiere, Pihat put on his best suit, a modest outfit that had served him well at rugby banquets in South Africa, but looked plain compared to designer tuxedos everyone else wore. When Pihat arrived at the Samuel Goldwyn Theatre, red carpet chaos surrounded him. Photographers shouted at celebrities, reporters conducted interviews, publicists shepherded VIPs through designated paths. Pihat joined the general entry line, figured he'd show his invitation and find his seat quietly. He reached the check-in desk, where a young assistant with an iPad was managing the guest list. "Name?" the assistant asked, without looking up. "Pihat van der Merwe," Pihat said. The assistant scrolled through her list, scrolled again, looked confused. "I don't see you on here. Do you have an invitation?" Pihat pulled out the email from Clint's office, confirming his attendance. The assistant looked at it, then at her supervisor. "This isn't on our master list. I can't let you in without confirmation." Another publicist joined them, examined the email, checked her own list. This must have been an informal invitation that didn't get processed through official channels, where at capacity, every seat is assigned. "I'm sorry, but without being on the master list, we can't accommodate you." Pihat felt embarrassment wash over him. This was a mistake. He shouldn't have come. Of course, a rugby coach from South Africa wouldn't be on the VIP list for a Hollywood premiere. "It's fine," Pihat said quietly. "I understand. I'll just go back to my hotel." He turned to leave, feeling foolish for thinking he belonged at this kind of event. Inside the theater, the premiere was about to begin. Clint had finished greeting people in the VIP section and was walking toward the stage to introduce the film. He glanced at the VIP rows, checking that key people were seated. Then he saw it, one seat empty. The seat that was supposed to be Pihat's. Clint stopped walking. "Where is he?" he asked the nearest person, who happened to be a studio executive. "Where is who?" the executive replied. "The rugby consultant, Pihat van der Merwe. His seat is empty." The executive looked confused. "I don't know who that is, Clint. Maybe he couldn't make it?" "He was invited personally," Clint said, his voice taking on an edge. "He flew from South Africa. He should be in that seat." A publicist overheard and approached nervously. "Is there a problem, Mr. Eastwood?" "Yes," Clint said, loud enough now that people in nearby rows were turning to look. "There's an empty seat where Pihat van der Merwe should be sitting. Find out why." The publicist spoke urgently into her headset, conferring with staff at the entrance. After a tense 30 seconds, she returned with information that made her face pale. "Mr. Eastwood, there was a mix-up. Mr. van der Merwe arrived but wasn't on the master guest list. He was turned away at check-in. Security has him leaving the property now." The theater had gone completely quiet. 2,000 people were now watching this conversation unfold. Clint's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. "You turned away a man who spent 3 months making this film authentic, a man I personally invited." "It was a processing error," the publicist said desperately. His invitation wasn't on the master list, so protocol required. I don't care about protocol, Clint interrupted, his quiet voice somehow carrying to every corner of the silent theater. I care about a promise I made. Get him back here. Now. The publicist spoke frantically into a headset. Mr. Eastwood, he's already left the property. It will take at least 15 minutes to locate him and bring him back. Then we wait, Clint said simply. He walked to the microphone on stage and addressed the packed theater. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. We're going to delay the start of the film for a few minutes. Someone important is missing. The audience sat in confused silence. Studio executives looked panicked. This wasn't how premieres worked. You started on time for the media, for the schedule, for the carefully choreographed plan. Morgan Freeman, sitting in the front row, was smiling slightly. He knew Clint well enough to recognize this kind of stand. Matt Damon leaned over to someone and whispered, "He's serious. We're not starting until that person gets here." Outside, security had located Piet walking toward the parking structure. "Mr. van der Merwe, we need you to come back. There's been a mistake. Mr. Eastwood is waiting for you." Piet was confused. "Waiting? For what?" "The premiere can't start without you," the security guard said, which made no sense to Piet, but he followed the guard back to the theater. Inside, Clint stood on stage, completely comfortable with 2,000 people sitting in silence waiting. A studio executive approached him quietly. "Clint, the media is on a schedule. Can we start and just bring him in when he arrives?" "No," Clint said. "We start when he's in his seat." Another 5 minutes passed. The silence in the theater was becoming almost unbearable. Then, finally, the doors at the back opened. Piet van der Merwe, looking embarrassed and confused, was escorted down the center aisle by the same publicist who'd turned him away. Every head in the theater turned to watch. 2,000 people watched this modestly dressed man walk toward the VIP section, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Clint stepped off the stage and met Piet in the aisle. "Piet," Clint said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I apologize. You were invited. You belong here. These people," he gestured to the packed theater, "they need to understand that this film exists because of people like you. People who lived this story. People who made sure we told it right." He guided Piet to the empty VIP seat, right in the middle of the section where stars and producers sat. Piet sat down, overwhelmed. Clint returned to the stage. "This is Piet van der Merwe," Clint said to the audience. "He played for the Springboks. He spent 3 months on our set, making sure every rugby moment in this film was authentic. Without him, we'd have made a movie about rugby. Because of him, we made a movie about what rugby meant to South Africa. That matters more than any of us sitting in this theater tonight." Clint paused. "Before we watch this film, I need you all to understand something. The people who make films aren't just the ones whose names are on the poster. They're people like Piet, consultants, experts, advisors who give their time and knowledge to help us tell stories that matter. When we invite them to celebrate what we built together, we honor that invitation, period." The theater erupted in applause, not polite premiere applause. Real, sustained, standing ovation applause. Piet sat in his VIP seat, tears streaming down his face, as 2,000 people stood and applauded him. Then the lights went down, and Invictus began. After the screening, the response was overwhelming. Critics praised the film's authenticity, particularly the rugby sequences. At the after-party, multiple people approached Piet to thank him for his contribution. Studio executives who'd never heard his name suddenly wanted to talk to him. But the most important moment came when Clint found Piet before he left for the airport the next day. "Thank you for coming," Clint said. "I meant what I said last night. Your contribution mattered. I can't believe you stopped the premiere," Piet said, For me, that was the right thing to do. Clint interrupted. You earned your seat in that theater more than half the people there. Someone made a mistake. I corrected it. That's all. The story of Clint stopping the Invictus premiere spread through Hollywood within hours. Media coverage focused on his speech about honoring contributors. Industry people talked about how he'd kept 2,000 people waiting rather than start without someone he'd promised would be there. Some thought it was unnecessary drama. Others thought it was one of the classiest moves they'd seen. The publicist who turned Piat away was quietly reassigned to a different department. The protocol that allowed people with legitimate invitations to be denied entry was revised, and every studio in Hollywood updated their premiere procedures to ensure that when directors personally invited consultants or advisors, those invitations were honored, absolutely. Years later, in an interview, Clint was asked about that night. You delayed a major premiere for 15 minutes, for someone most people had never heard of. Why? Because I gave him my word he'd be there. Clint said simply, when you give someone your word, you keep it. Doesn't matter if they're famous or unknown. Doesn't matter if it's convenient or inconvenient. Your word either means something or it doesn't. Mine means something. Piat van der Merwe returned to South Africa and continued coaching rugby. He kept the VIP credential from that premiere framed in his office. Students and players would ask about it, and he'd tell them the story of the night. Clint Eastwood stopped a premiere for him. It taught me something important, Piat would say. Success doesn't give you the right to forget the people who helped you get there. Real character is remembering them, honoring them, even when it's inconvenient. Today, Invictus is remembered as a powerful film about leadership, unity, and Nelson Mandela's vision for South Africa. But in Hollywood, it's also remembered for the premiere that started 15 minutes late, because Clint Eastwood refused to begin without a rugby coach from Johannesburg sitting in his assigned seat. The empty VIP chair became symbolic, a reminder that the people who contribute to films aren't just the ones with famous names. They're consultants, advisors, experts, who give their knowledge and time to help filmmakers tell authentic stories. And when someone like Clint Eastwood makes a promise to honor their contribution, he'll stop a premiere in front of 2,000 people to keep that promise. If this story of loyalty and integrity moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that keeping your word matters more than keeping a schedule, and that real character shows up in how you treat people who can't do anything for your career. Have you ever seen someone stop everything to honor a promise? Share your story in the comments.